My fellow Americans.
Welcome to a special Decoding TV bonus episode about the Boys series finale. I'm David Chen here with Patrick Klepek. Patrick, we have been discussing The Boys season 5 on the YouTube channel and also on the paid subscriber feed over at Decoding TV this season. But we finally come to the end, and I'll just say that heading into the finale, we were not super optimistic about how good this episode would be. All that said, what do you think of The Boys series finale?
I am shocked to say I thought it was fine. I actually thought it was a perfectly acceptable, decent ending to the show in which I was more or less happy and content with where the arcs ended up for a number of our characters. I think the journey towards that end was a real problem. I think the final season of The Boys was not good in any real capacity. I think it was a real fumbling towards the finish line. But if I separate my feelings on how we arrived at the series finale to the series finale itself, I had a good time. I thought it worked. I am willing to sort of overlook some plot holes or some people who are just sent to Canada, which we'll get into. But I thought it was. I don't think it was a catastrophic finale, but I think the catastrophe is, if we want to call it that, is the final season. I don't think the final episode of The Boys, if this is where we end things, absent spinoffs, was nearly as disastrous as I was worried it was going to be. I had a perfectly fine time and felt like they actually stuck many parts of the landing.
I agree with you for the most part. I think the issue with The Boys series finale is, first of all, as you and I have discussed, the marketing has overpromised and underdelivered, right? I think these big apocalyptic images that were shown in the online images and posters and all this stuff for The Boys season 5, the season just did not live up to that. And I think people are right to be disappointed. You know, I think the marketing says one thing, people get a different thing, and it's okay for people to be disappointed by that. On that note, I think that it really feels to me as though The Boys has scaled down its production value ambition over time. There are numbers floating around out there that season 1 cost around like $11 to $12 million an episode. And it just doesn't feel like this is a season of television that cost $100 million. Maybe it did, maybe inflation and tariffs or whatever have caused that. But the big problem, I think, with The Boys series finale is that it just felt so small. It felt like the ambition was small and they mostly hit what they were aspiring to, but like that ambition was like a lot smaller than A, what the show seemed to be leading up to, B, what the marketing committed to. And as a result, it felt very odd because I think even when you look at a show like Game of Thrones, where the ending is largely regarded as a disaster, that show built up to its final season in a really in a really big way. You cannot deny that the final season of Game of Thrones was extremely visually ambitious, like that they were trying to show you set pieces and grandeur and epic scope in a way that you had not even seen in previous seasons. You cannot say that about The Boys, right? Like, I just don't think you can say that this season was like, wow, so much more epic and I think that's also a real problem because this show airs on Prime Video, and we have another example of naughty superheroes right on Prime Video. It's called Invincible. You and I have talked about how this most recent season of Invincible was pretty great. And even though Invincible, I think, has a much smaller budget than The Boys, it feels so much more grander and epic in scope because there are like planet-ending implications every episode. And this just feels like, hey, we're in the scope of the White House and this focus group and this church, and that's it. And like no one outside of those things. And as a result, it just felt strangely very small, unambitious, and really not in keeping with the rest of the show. So did I hate it? Did I think it was terrible? No, it just was kind of like the show is going out with a whimper instead of a bang, is kind of what it feels like. And also, I think they really, really rushed the denouement. Like the first like the episode's about an hour 5 minutes, and the first like 35 to 40 minutes is like kind of leading up to the big confrontation, and then they kind of like speed run through everything else. There is an entire plot. There is an entire episode's worth of plot in like a 10-minute chunk towards the end of the episode, and they just sped right through it. And so, is that the worst thing in the world? No, it's not like a disaster or anything, but it's just kind of like people were predicting that this episode would feel very rushed, and it does feel very rushed. It's not catastrophically rushed, but it does feel very rushed, and so I did want to acknowledge that. So overall, was not a fan of the series finale of The Boys, but I think I'm with you in that I don't think it was like a horrible disaster or anything like that. All right, Patrick, why don't we talk about some of the stuff that happened in the episode? I'm going to read from the Wikipedia plot summary of the episode. The boys bury Frenchie as Homelander prepares a national address proclaiming his godhood from the Oval Office. End quote. Let's talk a little bit about this. Frenchie's funeral. It's very in keeping with The Boys to have juvenile ass humor, dick humor, nudity stuff, right? Like that's not out of line or not in keeping with the character of the show, and so it doesn't like betray the spirit of the show or anything. But the whole time I had trouble imagining Frenchie writing those words. You know what I mean? Like they turn his funeral into this ass joke, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny, but like I'm trying to imagine Frenchie writing that, like, and it's hard. It doesn't make sense to me. It just feels like the show writers tried to put in like this juvenile humor in there. What do you think? Am I just not expansive enough in my view of Frenchie?
No, I mean, especially relative to, an almost identical sequence for a different character that dies later in the episode, which I thought was actually handled much better. It's the characters channeling their thoughts on the character and vocalizing them. And doesn't mean we lose any of the vulgarity that is a defining aspect of The Boys, but it felt much more natural with the second sort of sequence that plays out similarly. So I'm with you. I mean, there's an argument to be made. There were many sort of forced ways to try and cram Frenchie into this episode, and you're whether you think they worked or not is in the eye of the beholder. But you could have gotten across the exact same sentiment by just having one of the characters vocalize it on their own, as opposed to having to read it from a letter.
Yeah, maybe I do protest too much. Maybe that isn't keeping. It's certainly not really in line with a lot of what we see from Frenchie this season. How about we leave it at that?
He's not like, I was like, one half of his coupling, one's deeply into pornography and can't stop talking about it. But like, that's not really him. He's pretty reserved.
Right. Yeah, that's been my sense, at least this season. After provoking Kimiko into testing her new power on her, Sage is rendered powerless and departs The Boys to live an ordinary life. End quote. Patrick, as we predicted, the Sage character ended up being almost completely useless in the final season of The Boys. I mean, she does help Kimiko get powered up, but that's about it. Also, she finds out she can't remember Othello anymore, and that's why she realizes like she's been depowered. But isn't she still responsible for some horrible atrocities? Like, didn't she create the concentration camps for the Starlighters? Do we think she deserves to live a normal, ordinary life, Patrick? What do you think?
I mean, I think like what ends up happening with her is very expected, but also expected in the way that, as we've criticized all along, they don't seem to know what to do with her, and so she ends up in the spot that I expected her to. But I feel like the show should be ahead of that.
Once the boys successfully infiltrate the White House with Ashley's help, Annie fights the Deep while Huey and Mother's Milk lure O Father away so Butcher and Kimiko can face Homelander. End quote. By the way, I found it weird that it didn't feel like the boys were really preparing for Soldier Boy to also be there, even though they wouldn't necessarily know that Soldier Boy's been put on ice. But either way, a lot of the final fight happens in the White House. And that, I think, is kind of the issue I was referring to earlier, where you'd expect this to kind of spill out onto the streets and Homelander to like zap a bunch of people and people to like fly through buildings and so on and so forth. But none of that really happens. Like it's a very small scope. It takes place within the course of a few rooms. And O Father is dispatched rather efficiently. Again, using the kind of indestructible ball gag that Ashley has gifted him in kind of a funny sequence. But yeah, I mean, I think Daveed Diggs did such a wonderful job in the role of O Father. And I don't know that the show really fully honored that character, but it's hard for me to say that about any character this season. Anyway, any thoughts on the death of O Father or kind of the White House sequence in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was at best when he had someone who was a true believer to actually play off of, right? Like once we lose Firecracker, we lose.
Yeah.
You know, she was a genuinely was when she says, I'm trying to find place in my heart for God and for Homelander, it feels like a real actual struggle for her. Like she truly does believe in this man as much as one can with Homelander. Whereas, you know, he's a grifter. Like he's a grifter through and through. Like, does the man even believe in God? Like, you know, who could say? Like, that's really not, I always chose to take him as he's just suave and great at talking. But he really lost something once Firecracker was gone, and even here where there's a brief moment with Ashley where it's like, you know, could we convince him? Could we like, oh, maybe this is gonna be something they're going to explore? Nope. Not partially because there's no time.
Speaking of characters' deaths, we see Annie take the Deep to a beach for some reason. I guess she's just trying to get away from population centers. Although she obviously doesn't know that the Deep is in big trouble with his fellow sea creatures. But yeah, the Deep dies. He's killed by giant sea creature. Any thoughts on the Deep death, Patrick?
I will say, the Deep was not used all that effectively over the course of this season, but he has one of the more satisfying arcs of a character on the show. Which is that
his confrontation with Homelander when Homelander says,
"Yes,
like I've always thought you were pathetic," and that his kind of sniveling, sucking up obsequiousness, like it does not work for Homelander, and finally the truth comes out, and there is some like emotional catharsis there.
I have never had less respect for anyone in my life.
Yeah, he's been a pathetic piece of shit from the jump, and I think we got to witness all of that. Like he has an elongated version of the Firecracker arc in which you get to see him go from, you know, like following in Homelander's footsteps, like a right-hand man, to sacrificing everything that he believes in right up until he has nothing left. And so where he ends up is sort of like the logical conclusion for the character. And I actually found it very goofy that I don't understand why Starlighter had to like take him away to the beach, like so that she could be removed from the fight that's happening with Homelander in the Oval Office. That part.
Well, it's so that he can meet this poetic justice death in the water.
I get it. And so he is probably the character that, like, as far as like series long arcs, again, they give him nothing to do this season, but broadly speaking, I think he ends up where he should, and I found that pretty satisfying.
That's a fair point. So, anyway, O Father and the Deep are killed, while Ryan aids Butcher in restraining Homelander, enabling Kimiko to blast them all and neutralize the Compound V in their blood, end quote. So let's just talk about the White House Oval Office fight scene. I'll just start and say I found this to be pretty disappointing. Especially because in the early part of the season, we see Homelander flying at virtually light speed, chasing after A-Train, right? And like we know that he can move super fast, and the idea that he can't get away from Butcher just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, the idea that like Butcher alone can like even stand any kind of chance against Homelander just is total nonsense. I'm glad they brought in Ryan later. That makes it more sort of understandable that they're kind of evenly matched.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a shock to me that like the ultimate end of the Homelander character takes place in just this one, like people punching each other in one room, basically. It just felt so small scope to me. What did you think, Patrick?
No, I'm with you. It's not even that the fight is staged like it's a perfectly fine fight, but it's like you have two characters who can, well, three characters if you include, Starlight, like that can fly, like they can be in the air, that could introduce different. It's almost like Homelander forgets he could leave the room like during the fight, but the actual.
Well, we just saw him fly to space in 3 seconds flat, like earlier on in the episode. So it's like the idea that he would feel like he can't get away just doesn't make any sense,
Yeah, it's sort of silly. That I do enjoy every time that Homelander would fly a little bit and then Butcher would grab him, throw back to the ground with his tentacles. That was satisfying basically every time it happened.
So a now powerless Homelander begs for his life, but Butcher kills him. End quote. Let's talk a little bit about this. So, I should mention that Kimiko has a vision of Frenchie. Turns out she can't get angry, right, to get the beam going. But Frenchie's ghost appears, and then she's like, you know what? The real beam in chest is the lovers we made along the way, right? And so that is how she's able to shoot the beam at Homelander and depower him. And I will say the one thing I thought was really good about this episode was the brief sequence we get with Homelander where he is depowered. Now, Eric Kripke has talked about why wouldn't you just like let Homelander go out into the into the public without powers, and wouldn't that be an interesting dynamic? And Eric Kripke, the showrunner of The Boys, has said the reason why you don't do that is because he's just going to get his hands on Compound V and get his powers back, and then we're back to square one. So he needs to die in that room somehow. That's kind of the logic, and I think that's actually reasonable. And the moments where he is depowered and trying to fly and trying to do the heat vision, Anthony Starr has given us just a boatload of memes before this character's swan song. What do you think, Patrick Klepek? This has been actually somewhat controversial. Like online, people are saying they didn't like seeing Homelander in that state or things of that nature. What did you think of the Homelander prelude to death?
I thought he was exactly as sniveling and pathetic as I thought he would be. I mean, this is completely in line with the character and how someone who acts that way, how a bully acts when they are stripped of whatever authority and power they have over you. So the reaction to it I find slightly like puzzling, because I think it was precisely...
You've seen it too, right? It's not just
yes. Now I agree that like locking up in jail, some superhero would just bail him out and give it, like, that makes sense, that like the only way that you end this is death. That said, I think I expressed in a previous episode, I would have loved the show at some point prior to this exploring for a longer period of time a depowered Homelander, in one in which the stakes weren't nearly as high as they were trying to set up for the finale of the show. Because the peak we get here, imagining that over the course of a season or part of a season, right, I just think there would have been quite a bit to explore that would have allowed Anthony Starr to, who is obviously wonderful, but I think, is working with a limited palette, in the context of the show itself. And in that brief moment, you just witnessed what would have been, it could have been something really interesting. But in the context of what the show was doing, trying to accomplish what the show set up for itself, I thought he made a meal out of the couple of minutes that we had, and it was delightful and satisfying. And honestly, parts of that outweigh like issues I have with the rest. It was like this whole sequence was as good as I was hoping it would be. It was very satisfying and kind of helps wash away some other elements.
I agree completely. Patrick Klepek, I don't know if you're aware, but it does appear to me that Homelander's final scenes in The Boys were heavily inspired by one of the greatest cinematic masterpieces of all time. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No.
I'm referring, of course, to the 2010 film directed by Jorma Taccone, MacGruber. So in the final moments of Homelander, right? He says he begs for his life, and he asks Billy Butcher to not kill him, and he says, "I'll do anything. I'll suck your D. I'll do whatever you want." And literally, when he said that, and the way that the scene was framed, like the shot of Homelander, like angle looking down on his face, like with that in that situation in front of a desk. To me, it is a clear reference to an extremely similar sequence in MacGruber, when MacGruber, having accidentally blown up the members of his team, is about to be fired by Powers Booth from the military operation that he's doing. And Ryan Philby walks to the room and he says, "Hey, I need you to help me." MacGruber says to him, like, "I need you to help me. I will do anything if you help me." And he says this:
"I will suck your dick. I will suck your dick. I will do it. Just join my team. I'll suck your dick. You can fuck me or get by me. You can watch me something. Just point at something in the room and I'll fuck it for you. Come on, just tell me what you want me to fuck."
Jesus Christ, MacGruber.
Just tell me what you want me to fuck.
I mean, I think the parallels are undeniable.
That is something I need to see that movie at some point. That's long been on a.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Like, the thing is, you think it's going to be like the SNL sketch, which is very silly in my opinion, and therefore not very good. But it's basically a parody of 80s action films. So I love MacGruber. Also, one of Christopher Nolan's favorite films, FYI. True story. Before I move on from this end sequence, I do want to point out that it's kind of funny that the Boys series finale just suddenly remembered that Huey had characteristics. There is this moment when they're fighting to get to the Oval Office, and he points at the smoke detector thing, and he says, like, "You've got your thing, I've got mine, remember?" Like, and it's like, what is Huey's thing? Well, if those who really remember what happens in The Boys will recall that Huey used to work at kind of an appliance store and was super into like appliances. And that's how he knows what model smoke detector it is and what's going to happen when he fires on it. And that also is why they're like doing an audio visual store at the end of the episode. Is that, hey, remember Huey used to have characteristics? It's funny, like the show has basically completely forgotten about all those until this episode. Like, I don't think it's played any major role whatsoever. And so it was a little bit jarring. I have to put that out there. But anyway, I wanted to remind people, like, they might be like, what was up with that Huey stuff in there? It's because those are some of his adjectives, right? Like those are some of the characteristics they gave him when they started the show.
I wonder, I don't know this off the dome, and I haven't read enough articles with the comparative moments of how the comic series ends relative to how the show ends. But moments like that is where I wonder, like, is it possible? Like, yes, it's true. It's maybe just something I've forgotten in the course of the show, and like the fact that shows take so long to make, and you can forget little bits that happened years and years and seasons ago. And then also is like, are they adapting a panel from the comic, like, so that they can adapt a panel from the comic? But I'm just not aware of that. Like, that was kind of what was going through my head sometimes with this stuff, was bits like that. But I thought it was fine. Again, it's still like, where's all the security in the White House? I mean, it just like feels very like. Who are those? Who are the people shooting the guns
for the extras? Right?
Who are the people shooting the guns? Where did they go?
Right. Yeah,
were they just unavailable after they got out?
So subsequent to all this, Ashley is removed from office, and Edgar once again becomes Vaught's CEO. That was a funny smash cut where Ashley is saying, we're moving past that, and then like literally the next scene, Ashley's removed from office. I did think that was quite funny, and
it was very good. It was
that was very good.
Probably it might have been the funniest joke.
Yes,
in the whole finale,
in the episode for sure. And then Edgar returns to Vought, and guess what? Vought is gonna keep going on, Patrick. So,
because he said that earlier in the season. Capitalism just need
It feels like the show really wanted to have this happy ending, like Boogie Night style, where we're checking in with all these members of the family as they go off their own separate ways. But they couldn't fully commit because Vought is back. And so it's like, okay, so what was actually accomplished? Like, what? I just think the capitalist critique element of The Boys was fairly strong in seasons 1 and 2 and has completely gone away by the final season. And so, like, the idea of Vought returning, it just doesn't feel super relevant to anything that the show is even doing at this point, you know? Which is a shame.
Well, Vought itself has sort of been lost in all of this.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Totally.
Like Vaught's it's a building they go into. But like Vought, in terms of what it represents, like it's really only when they bring Gus Fring back into the frame to remind you their role, as opposed to Vought playing sort of an active participatory role in the storytelling.
Overcome with despair after being rejected by Ryan and learning of his dog's death, Butcher goes to Vought Tower to release the virus, but is killed by Huey before he can do so, end quote. I mean, this whole sequence, I felt like should have been its own episode, right? It just felt very shoehorned in. They tried to get this in about 10 to 15 minutes of Butcher going back and trying to poison everyone. What did you make of this, Patrick?
Yeah, I'm with you that I was shocked when Homelander dies, and my wife got up to go to the bathroom briefly, and I was like, 30 minutes in and the episode's only an hour? You know, say what you will about the ending to Stranger Things, of which there is a lot to critique, and I'm not going to spoil the show, but that's a show that like gave a full hour to its final episode. Right. And then it's a 90-minute episode because they just said, F it. We're going to do a 30-minute, epilogue. Like we're going to give the episode the final, and like I have lots of problems with how that show what it chooses to do in its final episode, but it gives it room to breathe. Like, so that when you get to the wrapping of things up, that also feels like it has an enormous amount of room to breathe. And so it's indulgent, it's long, but it feels like the appropriate length for what the story is trying to accomplish. So putting aside how you feel about the story, like it's the right amount of time to tell that story. And that is like really lacking here. This feels like this is a 2-hour episode, like condensed, or at least 90 minutes condensed to just over an hour in a way that just cannot give it enough room to breathe.
Agreed completely. And by the way, his last words, which I think are a little bit hard to make out, are he basically Billy Butcher basically says to Huey, "You're the spitting of Lenny." I think he's trying to say you're the spitting image of Lenny, who is Billy Butcher's brother, who was introduced earlier in the series. Who those of you who follow the show may recall is a help to curb some of Billy Butcher's worst impulses. And so the idea is that Huey stayed good until the end, and I actually think that's kind of cool. I like that. I like the arc that Huey got in that somehow magically he survived, and also he never sort of gave up who he was at the end of the day.
I buy that for Huey. Huey's genuine sense of hope, or that keep fighting for a better dawn, was one of the better like arcs in the show. Yeah. If the show, I know this is comic accurate, or like it is relatively similar to how the comic ends, but the show that I watched and how they set up Butcher at the end, he presses the fucking button. He presses the button and he unleashes the virus. Like that, for me, this show opens with Huey stepping out with his girlfriend to have A-Train blow her to bits. And it feels most appropriate for the story that it's telling, that Butcher would get to the end and his revenge is unleashing a virus that destroys all the soups. And I did not buy the momentary pause that allows that not to happen. Perhaps that some of that is on the staging of the fight. Some of that is me not buying Butcher's moment of hesitation. The Butcher I saw, I walk in that room, doesn't hesitate, clicks the button, and that's the end of that's the version of the story that we end up with.
I think there's a bigger problem with The Boys season 5 and all the seasons, in that the show, I don't think, ever really figured out how to approach the character of Butcher. I think from what I understand from the comics, he is like pretty much full blown bad guy. Like the idea is that by trying to fight the bad guys, you like become the bad guy. There's something interesting about that. And The Boys, the TV show, has waffled in that, right? Like earlier on the season, I thought, oh wow, they're really going full blown villain arc with Butcher. Nope, they basically like reeled it back from what I could tell. And the show has waffled and flip flopped on whether or not we should root for Butcher. I think it's been true for multiple seasons. Like what is Butcher's actual status? And I think that waffling kind of continues all the way to the end, to the end of the character. So kind of a shame because it could have been interesting. And I think sometimes you see this thing where shows get addicted to, or they love their characters so much and they want to portray them in a positive character so much, and they curb the character's worst impulses in a way that I don't think helps with the storytelling, because, you know, at the end of the day, Butcher and Huey are like mostly aligned, except for and it makes this thing seem like more of a last minute freak out than this is the logical culmination of everything that Butcher has been doing until this point, in my opinion. You know, other people may disagree with that. Also, big question, Patrick Klepek. What's going to happen with all that poison that's in the sprinkler system? Did Huey like go in there and scoop it out, you think? Did he like go in there and did he go in this magical single tank or whatever, you know, wherever? And do you think he told her, hey, you got to get rid of the whole sprinkler system? Who are you? Why do we need to do this? Just trust me. Whatever.
Yeah, I
barely an inconvenience.
I had bigger problems with the scene than that, but I'm with you.
After the boys disband, Mother's Milk renews his marriage vows and takes in Ryan. Kimiko goes to France, and Huey and Annie prepare to become parents. End quote. I have no real issues with these, right? Like these are like nice endings for these characters, and they deserve to have nice endings after all the stuff they've been through. Very convenient and quick, you know, like we're like fast forwarding past these really, really fast, but you know, like the actual end point for these characters it's fine, you know? There is a moment when, so the idea is that Huey turns down an offer from the president of the United States to run the superhero department because he's doing his startup. And his startup is a hardware electronics store that is a front for Annie's crime-fighting activities. We also learn that Annie is pregnant. And at the very last scene, you know, Huey whispers to the belly, like, hey, Robin, take care of your mom for me. Which, for those who recall, is the name of Huey's ex-girlfriend who dies in the very first episode of the show.
Oh.
So, on the one hand, hey, that's very sweet that the memory of Robin gets to live on, and Robin was the one that kind of brought them together.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
not
naming
sure.
your child that your girlfriend, wife is carrying after your ex-girlfriend, I don't know, kind of a faux pas, Patrick.
Yeah,
What do you think?
You know, oftentimes every parent, every couple handles this differently. It is not uncommon for when you're trying to come up with a name for a child that like everyone gets like a veto card. Like I'm just saying no to that one, and I don't have to offer an explanation. And I feel that's one of those situations where Annie would have said like that's really like like heartwarming, and I see where you're coming from. I'm going to play my veto card. Like you don't get to name. You don't.
Maybe we can name the dog after. Maybe we can name the cat after Robin.
Or middle name, like middle ground.
Name? Okay,
like you know you're only saying that when you're angry at the child, trying to get their attention. You know, blah blah blah, Robin. You know, sort of thing. Little weird.
Yeah,
a little weird.
Yeah.
But you know what? Huey's been through a lot. Gotta be honest. Like he went through a lot over the course of the show. Sexually assaulted multiple times for comedic value by the show's approach. So you know what? Maybe Huey's owed one.
And that basically brings us to the end of the episode. Now, I do want to point out that we are recording this about 36 hours after the episode is aired, and the episode, the series finale of The Boys has proven to be quite polarizing. These last two episodes are among the lowest rated episodes in the entire series. Patrick Klepek, do you think the show deserves that?
No, I think those are reactive reflections to the end of the series more than it is those episodes in particular. And that's not me mounting some great defense of the final 2 episodes, but I think that is you see people accepting the fate that was in front of them, which was, well, if you were hoping the show was just sort of spinning its wheels before it sets up like a really exciting and complicated sort of like end game. No, like the show you've been watching is the show how it's gonna end. The quality of the writing and the characters, like it's gonna kind of be what you thought it was. And so I feel like that is like a collective cry into the clicking of a rating of like, oh, son of a bitch.
It's a primal scream
it is
about the final season of the show. It's not about those specific episodes. It's about the overall arc of the series, in your opinion.
I agree. Or rather, I agree with myself that, yes, that is that's what's happening here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. But also, I do think there's probably things they could have done to impact people's opinions on these last 2 episodes. They might not have been things that were physically possible. Like they might not have been things that were within the budget of the boys. Like imagine, if you will, like an alternate finale where there was like an epic battle sequence, like Man of Steel, Zack Snyder style, like huge battle between Butcher and Homelander through the clouds, and Starlight and the Deep like punching each other at the Lincoln Memorial, you know, on all this stuff like that. And like you can imagine, like, oh, what people are like, oh, like all is forgiven. Like that was so epic that I must give this episode a decent score. But like the show either wasn't interested in that or couldn't pull it off. And as a result, I think people feel very disappointed in the finale, and that is completely reasonable. So I think you're half right. You know, I think like you're right that there's a huge part of it that's disappointment with the show. But I also think that if the finale had really delivered in a big way, in a way that's like, oh, wow, I've never seen anything like that before. Which, by the way, some finales do that, right? I mean, again, even like Game of Thrones, despite the fact that people hate how that show ended, there is some really epic, visually spectacular stuff in that show. And it's like,
I guess I just mean the boys, like the quality of the final 2 episodes is in line with the quality of the rest of the season, and frankly, the last 2 seasons, which is not a particularly high bar. But I don't think there's some steep drop off that happens, like at the end of like. Turns out, this is the show they were making. That sucks. I wanted something better than that, but I don't. Yeah. I don't think there's like some people wanted the sudden up, like the shoot up. And I don't think it's shot down. Like, I don't think it's like manifestly worse. I think it's you've run out of, like, I think part of that is like quite literally you've run out of room to give yourself plausible explanations or that something could be different. So I think it's a natural reaction to treat them more harshly because, there's not another episode, right? Like there's not another, there can't be a course correction. We're just done.
As I look back on the season, I think there were some pretty fatal errors from what I can tell, right? Number one, I mean, there's a bunch, okay? So let me go through, just try to rattle them off, okay? Number one, the way this show treated the characters of Gen V. Oh, we didn't even talk about that really, but like...
neither did the show, so I think we're fine.
I saw a post that like, somebody who worked on the show said, oh, the characters of Gen V will play a significant role in the finale. And then somebody like quote tweeted that and said, yeah, like Marie turned the key in the car that drove them to Canada.
Awful. I would just rather they weren't included.
You just shouldn't have included them. You should not have tied these 2 shows together. That was a disaster. We have talked about this multiple times on Decoding TV. You've already talked about how Sister Sage, complete waste of a character, did not do anything interesting, seemed to be completely incompetent at her job, and then kind of F's off at the end. The show's total obsession with Soldier Boy and setting him up, only to not give him a satisfying ending, probably because they want to have more adventures of Soldier Boy later on. But it just felt like, why are we sidetracking for this other character that we don't really care as much about as our main characters? Doesn't really make any sense. So those are some of like the bigger issues I would say with the season, and they were like season wide problems, right?
Mhm.
Season wide problems. Anything else about this season or this finale, Patrick, as we wrap up probably our final conversation about the boys, at least until Vought Rising, although I'm really not looking forward to that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate a realization I had that was crystallized by this season, which was I think the show's obsession with Trump was to its detriment.
Yeah.
It was something the show sort of stumbled into over the course of. It's actually one of those situations where I think the satire it was chasing caught up with reality, and they realized, oh wow, the context in which we're making this show means we can shade in the colors a little bit differently. And rather than just like the shading of the show, it became the show. And I have no, this is all in some ways encapsulated by, I don't like Elon Musk. I think he's an awful person. He has ruined one of my favorite like social media platforms. Inserting him into the show.
Homelander, glad you're here. I'd love to bend your ear about white fertility rates.
Oh, why don't you wait for us in the garden?
Is so emblematic of.
Are you talking about the billionaire character that was in the
Yes.
final episode?
Yes.
But by the way, I believe Elon Musk has actually appeared in an earlier episode of the show, like Elon Musk, the actual guy. Or he's referenced. Actually, he's referenced, I believe, right? So Elon Musk and a guy that is very similar to Elon Musk, both in The Boys, FY.
It's like we have an hour to wrap this up, and we're going to spend 5 to 7 minutes on an Elon Musk parody. It's deeply frustrating.
Was it
and
5? Okay, I think you're
felt
being
like
a little
5
unfair
minutes.
there. It
Felt
was like
like
a few. It was like a couple minutes. It was not
long
that
enough, like
Yes.
for an episode that was short by the standards of the storytelling that was required to really give it justice. Whatever, like the length is sort of irrelevant to the point, which is it's a distraction, and it chased a shiny object over and over and over again, and I think that was really to the detriment of the show. I don't think it necessarily fixes everything, but I think it was it
fixes everything if they don't go that way.
if they don't
right?
go that
Yeah,
route.
yeah.
But if you don't, it opens up avenues for different ways for these characters to be contextualized, different motivations. It could be, rather than feel like it's holding up a mirror to the world I'm in right now, I see that world every day. And that's why I got exhausted with every week, like, oh, can't satire reality enough. Like this thing that's happened in real life that the boys predicted. Like, it's going to make this series feel like it didn't make it its own. It just chased a version of reality that I found exhausting, and I think was a detriment to the characters and the world. And I think it's one of the big reasons there's such a split between the first half of this show and the second half of the show, because that's one of the big changes they make over the course of time.
I think that's a great point. I will also say that I think the V1 arc this season just was completely baffling to me. First of all, why give Homelander V1 if like giving Homelander V1 basically made virtually no difference to the plot, right?
Yep.
Like he has V1 for about 1.5 episodes, and he does he does nothing differently as a result. So it's like, what was we had multiple episodes building up to V1, nothing came of it.
Nope.
Also, I'll just say this, like, I feel like they might have been better off having Soldier Boy being the one that depowers Homelander, right?
100%
Because
agree.
the Kimiko stuff, like, oh, we've been experimenting on Kimiko to do the optic blast that Soldier Boy does. Comes out of nowhere, right? Comes out of nowhere. And then, meanwhile, Soldier Boy, we're just putting him on ice. So it's like, he's not doing anything. Like, why not make it more interesting so that Soldier Boy, like, changes side? But then it's like, I don't know. The way they handled the V1, Homelander getting it making no difference to the plot, and then putting Soldier Boy on ice, it's just a sequence of just baffling decisions that, like, I do not understand why they decided to go this way. You know, maybe there's other stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. And like
He should have been invincible from the jump. That should have been like wrapped up in if the first episode of this season that's the new stakes. Is like,
Right.
you know, maybe they introduce that they're making the virus, and it turns out like then extinguish that immediately. Like, oh, we think this is gonna be what they're doing all season. Oh, now that can't be because Homelander is invincible, and instead they just drag it out to have no consequence.
So overall, pretty rough final season of the show. Pretty bad, and I think like you might not think that the scores are emblematic of the last 2 episodes, but I do think like if I said those IMDb scores describe the whole season, you would probably be on board with that.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, The Boys ends with a whimper and not a bang, and that is a shame for a show that once felt like it really had its finger on the pulse of capitalism, how capitalism is handling superhero satire, those kinds of things. Huge bummer, but they can't all be bangers. They can't all win. So this was one that did not end well. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.